The next few days passed in a haze of waiting and uncertainty. Ethan, Lyra, and Nera stayed near the communications tower, taking turns keeping watch while they waited for a response to their message. The twins tried to remain hopeful, but the silence from their people weighed heavily on them. Ethan did his best to keep their spirits up, telling stories and sharing memories from his past. But even he couldn't ignore the growing tension. On the fourth night, just as exhaustion began to take its toll, a faint hum filled the air. At first, Ethan thought it might be the wind or some malfunctioning part of the tower. But then a bright light appeared in the sky, growing larger and brighter with each passing second. It wasn't a plane or a helicopter. It was something else. Entirely, it's one of our ships, Lyra said, her voice trembling with relief. She grabbed Nera's hand, both women staring upward in awe. Ethan shielded his eyes against the glare, watching as the sleek silver vessel descended gracefully into a nearby clearing. The craft landed without a sound, its surface shimmering like liquid metal. A ramp extended downward, and several figures emerged, their glowing green eyes marking them as Velari. One of them stepped forward, a tall, regal-looking woman with an air of authority. "Lyra, Nera," she said, her melodic voice carrying across the distance. "You've done well." The twins rushed toward her, embracing her warmly. Ethan hung back, unsure of his place in this reunion. But when the woman turned her gaze to him, her expression softened. "And you must be Ethan Carter," she said. "We owe you a great debt." Ethan shook his head, feeling awkward under her scrutiny. "I was just doing my job." The woman smiled faintly. "Your modesty is admirable. But do not underestimate your role in all of this. You protected two of our most valued diplomats and helped pave the way for peace." As the group boarded the ship, Ethan felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him: relief, pride, and a touch of sadness. He had known from the start that this mission would eventually come to an end, but now that it was happening, he wasn't sure how to feel. What came next? Would he simply return to his old life, or was there room for something more? The journey to the Velari homeworld was unlike anything Ethan had ever experienced. The ship traveled faster than any human technology could manage, and the interior was a blend of elegance and efficiency. The walls seemed alive, shifting colors and patterns in response to the passengers' moods. Ethan spent much of the trip sitting quietly, observing the twins as they interacted with their fellow Velari. They were clearly respected and loved by their people, and Ethan couldn't help but feel proud of everything they had accomplished. When they arrived, Ethan was overwhelmed by the beauty of the planet. Towering crystal forests stretched as far as the eye could see, their surfaces catching the light of three suns. The air was clean and fresh, carrying the scent of unfamiliar flowers. Cities floated above vast oceans, their structures glowing softly in the twilight. It was a world of harmony and wonder, a stark contrast to the chaos of Earth. The twins led Ethan to a grand hall where leaders from both factions awaited them. The atmosphere was tense but hopeful, and Ethan could sense the weight of the moment. Lyra and Nera stood at the center, their voices steady as they presented their case for peace. Ethan watched from the sidelines, amazed by their courage and eloquence. By the time they finished speaking, even the most skeptical members of the council seemed moved. After hours of deliberation, the decision was made. A treaty would be signed, ending decades of conflict. Cheers erupted throughout the hall, and Ethan felt a surge of pride. He had played a small part in this monumental achievement, and it was enough to make him believe in the possibility of change, not just for the Velari, but for everyone. That evening, as celebrations filled the streets, Lyra and Nera sought out Ethan. They found him standing on a balcony overlooking the ocean, the lights of the floating city reflecting off the water below. "You did it," Ethan said, turning to them with a smile. "You brought peace." "We couldn't have done it without you," Lyra replied, stepping closer. "You've given us so much." Nera nodded, her green eyes glowing softly. and now we want to give you something in return. A new beginning. Ethan frowned, unsure. What she meant? What are you saying? Lyra took his hand, her touch warm and reassuring. Stay with us. Come to our world. You've earned a place here. Ethan hesitated, the offer catching him off guard. He had always been a wanderer, someone who thrived on independence. But as he looked at the twins, at the sincerity in their expressions, he realized how much he had changed. He wasn't the same man who had accepted this assignment weeks ago. He had found something, or rather, someone he cared about deeply. I don't know, he admitted. It's a big decision. You don't have to decide right away, Nira said gently. But please, think about it. We want you to be part of our lives, not just now, but always. Ethan nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future beyond survival, beyond duty. A future filled with love, trust, and belonging. The next morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, Ethan made his choice. He joined the twins. On another balcony, his heart pounding with anticipation. I've thought about it, he said, meeting their eyes. And I'd like to stay. Lyra's face lit up with joy, and Nira wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close. Welcome home, she whispered Dot in that moment. Ethan knew he had made the right decision. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a new life. And as he stood there, surrounded by the twins and the promise of a brighter future, he felt truly alive for the first time. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with Lyra and Nira by his side. Together, they had overcome impossible odds. And together, they would build a world worth fighting for. The victory in the valley felt like a turning point, but Ethan knew better than to let his guard down. The attackers had retreated, but they weren't defeated, not completely. Whoever was behind these threats was persistent, and Ethan doubted this would be the last time they faced danger. Still, for now, they had a brief reprieve, and he intended to make the most of it. After securing the area and ensuring no one was left hiding among the rocks, Ethan turned to Lyra and Nira. Both women looked exhausted but triumphant, their glowing eyes reflecting the rising sun. You two did great, he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. I couldn't have done it without you. Lyra smiled faintly, though her expression was tinged with sadness. It's not over yet. They'll come back. Nira nodded, her gaze distant. And when they do, we need to be ready. But for now, let's rest. They decided to stay in the valley for a few hours, using the time to recover and regroup. Ethan tended to a small cut on his arm, while the twins rested against a large boulder, their hands linked together. Watching them, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at their strength. They were so different from anyone he'd ever met, gentle yet fierce, vulnerable yet unbreakable. He realized then how much he had come to rely on them, not just as allies but as friends. As the morning wore on, Ethan suggested they move to a safer location. We can't stay here, he said. If they send reinforcements, we'll be sitting ducks. The twins agreed, and they packed up their supplies quickly. This time, instead of heading deeper into the wilderness, Ethan led them toward an old mining town he remembered from his travels. It was abandoned now, its buildings crumbling and overgrown with weeds, but it offered shelter and a chance to lay low for a while. When they arrived, Ethan scouted the area, checking each building for signs of recent activity. Satisfied that the town was empty, he ushered the twins into what appeared to be an old general store. The roof was mostly intact, and the thick stone walls provided some protection from the elements. This will work for now, Ethan said, setting down his backpack. We can stay here until we figure out our next move. Lyra and Nira explored the space cautiously, brushing dust off shelves and examining faded advertisements on the walls. Despite the decay, there was a strange charm to the place, as if it held memories of a simpler time. Nira paused by a cracked mirror, her reflection shimmering faintly in the dim light. Do you think people were happy here? She asked softly. Ethan shrugged. Maybe. Life was harder back then, but people found ways to make it work. Lyra joined her sister, placing a hand on her shoulder. I wonder if we'll ever find somewhere like this again. Somewhere peaceful. Ethan didn't answer right away. He wanted to reassure them, to promise that peace was within reach, but he wasn't sure he believed it himself. Instead, he focused on practical matters, reinforcing the doors and windows to make the building more defensible. The twins helped, where they could, clearing debris and organizing their supplies. By evening, they had transformed the old store into a makeshift home. They built a small fire in the center of the room, its warmth driving away the chill of the night. Sitting around the flames, they shared a quiet meal, the silence between them comfortable rather than awkward. Eventually, Lyra broke the quiet. Ethan, can I ask you something? He looked up, surprised by the seriousness in her tone. Of course, she hesitated, glancing at Nira before continuing. Do you ever feel torn between your duty and everything else? Ethan sighed, setting aside his plate. He had been expecting this conversation eventually, but he still didn't know how to answer. Sometimes, he admitted. Protecting you is my job, but it's become more than that. You're not just clients to me anymore. You're friends? Nira offered gently. More than friends, Ethan finished, his voice barely above a whisper. The twins exchanged a glance, their expression softening. We feel the same way, Lyra said. But we don't want you to feel trapped. If being with us complicates things too much, it doesn't, Ethan interrupted firmly. Yes, it's complicated. Yes, it's dangerous. But none of that matters compared to how I feel about you both. I care about you. A lot. Nira reached out, taking his hand in hers. Then don't fight it. Let yourself feel. We're here with you no matter what. Her words brought a lump to Ethan's throat. He had spent so much of his life pushing people away, keeping his emotions locked tight. But with Lyra and Nira, he didn't have to. They accepted him for who he was, flaws and all. That night, as they settled down to sleep, Ethan felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The world outside was still full of uncertainty, but inside the old store, surrounded by the twins' warmth and trust, he felt safe. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future beyond the mission, a future where he wasn't alone. The next morning brought bad news. As Ethan checked the perimeter, he discovered fresh tire tracks leading into the town. Someone had been here recently, and based on the direction of the tracks, they might still be nearby. He hurried back to the store, his heart racing. We've got company, he said, his voice tense. We need to move, now. The twins didn't argue. They grabbed their belongings and followed Ethan out the back door, sticking to the shadows as they made their way through the town. The air was heavy with unease, every sound amplified in the silence. They reached the edge of the town without incident, but as they stepped into the open, a voice called out, "Stop right there!" Ethan froze, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. A group of men emerged from the trees, their faces hidden behind masks. One of them stepped forward, holding a device that crackled with energy. "You've caused us a lot of trouble," the man said, his tone cold. "But it ends today." Ethan glanced at the twins, silently communicating his plan. Lyra nodded slightly, her hands beginning to glow. Nira took a deep breath, preparing herself. Then, with a sudden burst of movement, they sprang into action. Lyra created a barrier, shielding them from the attackers' weapons. Nira unleashed pulses of energy, forcing the men to scatter. Ethan fired his weapon, aiming for their leader. The battle was intense, but the trio fought as one, their movements perfectly synchronized. Finally, after what felt like hours, the attackers retreated, leaving behind only silence. Ethan lowered his weapon, his chest heaving with exertion. "Are you two okay?" he asked, turning to the twins. Lyra nodded, though her face was pale. "We're fine, but we can't stay here." Ethan agreed. They needed a new plan, one that wouldn't lead them constantly on the run. As they walked away from the town, he thought about their options. There had to be a way to end this once, and for all dot later that day, they stumbled upon an old communications tower. It was damaged but still functional, and Ethan realized it might be their best chance to call for help. Using the twins' knowledge of advanced technology, they managed to repair the equipment and send a message to Velari authorities. "We've done all we can," Lyra said, sitting back as the signal transmitted. "Now we wait." Ethan nodded, feeling a mix of hope and anxiety. He didn't know if help would arrive in time or if it would come at all. But for now, they had done everything they could. As night fell, they huddled together near the base of the tower, watching the stars appear one by one. Ethan wrapped an arm around Lyra and Nira, pulling them close. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. And in that moment, that was enough. The days in the cabin passed slowly, each one blending into the next. Ethan, Lyra, and Nira had settled into a rhythm that felt almost natural. They cooked meals together, shared stories by the fire, and took turns keeping watch during the night. Despite the danger lurking outside, there was a quiet comfort in their shared isolation. For Ethan, it was a strange but welcome change from the chaos of his past life. But as much as he tried to focus on practical matters, like securing the perimeter or rationing supplies, he couldn't ignore the shift in his feelings. The twins! Confession had opened a door he hadn't realized was closed. He found himself thinking about them constantly, noticing little things. The way Lyra's laughter lit up the room, or how Nira's voice softened when she spoke to him. It wasn't just admiration. It was something deeper, something he hadn't experienced in years. One evening, after a long day of gathering firewood, Ethan sat alone on the porch, staring out at the forest. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Lyra approaching. She carried 2 cups of tea, offering one to him with a small smile. "You've been quiet today," she said, sitting beside him. "Is everything okay?" Ethan hesitated, unsure how to answer. "I've just been thinking," he admitted. "About everything," Lyra nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You've done so much for us. I hope you know how grateful we are." "It's my job," Ethan replied automatically, though the words felt hollow even to him. She tilted her head, studying him. "Is that all it is? A job?" Her question caught him off guard. He looked away, focusing on the horizon. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" Lyra pressed gently. "You're allowed to feel more than duty, Ethan. You're human." Her words struck a chord deep within him. For so long, he buried his emotions under layers of discipline and responsibility. But now, sitting here with Lyra, he wondered if that was enough. Was it wrong to let himself care to love? Before he could respond, Nira joined him, carrying a blanket. She wrapped it around her shoulders and sat on Ethan's other side. "The nights are getting colder," she said softly. "We should stay close." There was a moment of silence, as they watched the stars appear one by one. Then Nira spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever think about what happens after this? After the danger is over?" Ethan frowned, considering her question. "I haven't thought that far ahead. My focus has always been on surviving the moment. But what if the moment lasts longer?" Lyra asked. "What if we find a way to end this threat and create peace, not just for our people, but for ourselves?" Ethan didn't have an answer. He wanted to believe in the possibility of peace, but doubt lingered in the back of his mind. Could they really overcome the forces working against them? And even if they did, where would that leave him? As if sensing his hesitation, Nira reached out and placed a hand on his knee. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," she said kindly. "Just know that whatever happens, we'll face it together." Her touch sent a wave of warmth through him, melting some of the walls he built around his heart. He glanced at both women, seeing the sincerity in their eyes. They weren't asking for promises or declarations. They were simply offering themselves, fully and without reservation. That night, as they prepared for bed, Ethan felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him. He knew he was walking a fine line between duty and desire, between protecting the twins and allowing himself to be vulnerable. But for the first time, he didn't feel the need to fight it. Instead, he embraced the uncertainty, trusting that whatever came next would be worth it. The next morning brought a surprise. While Ethan was checking the perimeter, he spotted a drone hovering near the edge of the forest. It was small and sleek, its surface reflecting the sunlight like a mirror. At first, he thought it might belong to wildlife researchers or hikers, but something about it felt off. The drone moved too deliberately, scanning the area with precision. Ethan quickly returned to the cabin and told the twins what he'd seen. Their expressions darkened immediately. "It's them," Lyra said grimly. "They found us." Nira nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "We need to leave, now." Ethan agreed, though the idea of leaving their sanctuary filled him with dread. They'd packed quickly, taking only what they could carry. As they drove away in the SUV, Ethan kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights following them. But the road remained empty, at least for now. They traveled for hours, sticking to remote paths and avoiding populated areas. By the time they stopped to rest, the sun had set, casting the world in shadows. They parked near a rocky outcrop, using it as cover while they planned their next move. "We can't keep running forever," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "Sooner or later, they'll catch up to us," Lyra sighed, her usual confidence wavering. "We know. But what choice do we have?" Nira looked at Ethan, her green eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "Maybe there's another way. If we confront them directly, if we show them we're not afraid, it might give us an advantage." Ethan shook his head. "That's too risky. We don't know how many of them there are or what kind of weapons they have. But we have something they don't," Lyra insisted. "Each other. Our bond makes us stronger." Ethan wanted to argue, but he couldn't deny the truth in her words. Together, the three of them had faced incredible odds and survived. Maybe they could do it again. After a brief discussion, they decided to set a trap. Using the twins' energy manipulation abilities and Ethan's tactical knowledge, they devised a plan to lure their enemies into a vulnerable position. It wasn't foolproof, but it was their best shot. The next day, they chose a location, a narrow valley surrounded by steep cliffs. It was the perfect spot for an ambush, providing plenty of cover while limiting the attackers' mobility. They spent hours preparing, setting up barriers and positioning themselves strategically. When night fell, they waited in tense silence. Hours passed without incident, and Ethan began to wonder if their plan had failed. But then, just as dawn broke, the sound of engines echoed through the valley. Several vehicles approached, their headlights cutting through the mist. Ethan tightened his grip on his weapon, his heart pounding. "Here we go," he muttered. The attackers spilled out of their vehicles, armed and ready. They moved cautiously, clearly expecting resistance. What they didn't expect was the combined force of Ethan, Lyra, and Nira. Lyra raised her hands, creating a shimmering energy field that blocked their path. Nira followed suit, unleashing pulses of light that disoriented their foes. Meanwhile, Ethan fired precise shots, taking down anyone who tried to advance. The battle was chaotic but swift. Within minutes, the attackers were retreating, their plans thwarted. As the dust settled, Ethan turned to the twins, relief washing over him. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. Lyra smiled, her glow returning brighter than ever. "Yes, we did." In that moment, Ethan realized something important. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond they had formed. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew they could face them as long as they stayed together. The aftermath of the attack left the estate in disarray. The east wing was badly damaged, its walls blackened and furniture reduced to ash. Emergency crews worked tirelessly to contain the fire and assess the damage, while local authorities questioned Ethan and the twins about what had happened. Despite their efforts, no solid evidence emerged to identify the attackers. Whoever they were, they had covered their tracks well. Ethan stood outside, watching as firefighters packed up their equipment. His body ached from the fight, but his mind was racing. He couldn't stop thinking about how close they'd come to disaster. If Lyra and Nira hadn't used their abilities, or if he hadn't acted quickly, they might not have survived. The thought sent a chill down his spine. He knew they couldn't stay here any longer. This place was compromised. When the commotion died down, Ethan returned to the main house where the twins were waiting for him in the study. They looked exhausted, their usual glow dimmed by the weight of the night's events. Still, they managed. Weak smiles when they saw him. "Thank you," Lyra said softly. Again, Ethan shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. We're not safe here. Whoever attacked us knows where we are, and they'll try again." "We need to move," Nira nodded, her expression serious. "We agree. But where can we go? Our enemies seem to be everywhere." Ethan had already been thinking about that. "There's a secure location I know of, a cabin deep in the mountains. It's isolated, hard to reach, and equipped with basic supplies. If we leave tonight, we can get there before dawn." The twins exchanged a glance, then turned back to him. "We trust you," Lyra said. "If you think it's our best option, we'll go." With little time to waste, Ethan began making preparations. He packed only the essentials: food, water, first aid supplies, and weapons. The twins gathered a few personal items, including a small device that seemed important to them. Ethan didn't ask about it. Some things were better left unspoken. By midnight, they were ready to leave. Ethan drove them away from the estate in a rugged SUV, taking back roads to avoid detection. The journey was long and tense, each mile stretching endlessly as they listened for any sign of pursuit. But the night remained quiet, the only sounds coming from the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of trees in the wind. When they finally reached the cabin, Ethan felt a flicker of relief. It was exactly as he remembered: small but sturdy, nestled in a clearing surrounded by dense forests. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and earth. He unlocked the door and ushered the twins inside, quickly checking the rooms to ensure they were alone. "This will do for now," he said, setting down the supplies. "It's not luxurious, but it's safe." Lyra looked around, her glowing eyes taking in the simple furnishings. "It's perfect." "Thank you, Ethan." He waved off her gratitude. "Let's focus on staying alive. Rest for now. I'll keep watch." But the twins refused to let him shoulder the burden alone. "You need rest too," Nira insisted. "We'll take turns keeping watch." Ethan wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in their faces. Reluctantly, he agreed, knowing they were right. He couldn't protect them if he collapsed from exhaustion. Over the next few days, they settled into a routine. During the day, they explored the surrounding area, gathering firewood and scouting for potential threats. At night, they took turns standing guard, always alert for any signs of danger. Slowly, the tension began to ease, replaced by a sense of camaraderie. One evening, as they sat around the fireplace, Lyra brought up a topic Ethan had been avoiding. "Tell us about yourself," she said gently. "You've done so much for us, but we don't really know who you are." Ethan hesitated, unsure how to respond. Talking about his past wasn't something he enjoyed. But the twins' genuine curiosity and the warmth of their company made it hard to resist. "I was in the military for years," he began slowly. "Deployed to different places, doing whatever needed to be done. When I got out, I started working as a private contractor, protecting people, mostly. It's all I've ever known." "And before that," Nira asked, "what about your family?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "My parents passed away when I was young. I don't have much family left, just memories." The twins exchanged a glance, their expression softening. "We understand loss," Lyra said quietly. "Our world has seen its share of pain." Ethan nodded, grateful for their understanding. For the first time, he realized how much they had in common. They weren't just aliens with strange abilities. They were survivors. Like in Dot, as the days turned into weeks, Ethan found himself growing closer to the twins. Their conversations became deeper, more personal. They shared stories about their childhood on their home planet, describing festivals filled with light and music, and moments of joy spent with loved ones. In return, Ethan talked about his own experiences, the friendships he'd formed in the military, the places he'd seen, the lessons he'd learned. Through it all, he couldn't ignore the growing connection between them. It wasn't just professional respect or mutual dependence. It was something stronger, something he hadn't felt in years. He caught himself staring at Lyra's smile or lingering on Nira's thoughtful gaze. And they, in turn, seemed to seek him out, finding excuses to sit near him or touch his arm lightly during conversations. One afternoon, as they walked through the forest together, Lyra stopped suddenly, turning to face him. "Ethan, there's something we need to tell you." Her tone made his heart skip a beat. "What is it?" Nira stepped closer, her green eyes meeting his. "In our culture, relationships are different. We don't limit ourselves to one partner. Love is fluid, shared freely among those who care for each other." Ethan blinked, trying to process her words. "Are you saying—" Lyra took his hand, her touch sending a jolt through him. "We care about you, Ethan. Both of us. And we want you to know that it's okay to feel the same way." For a moment, Ethan was speechless. He had suspected there was something between them, but hearing it out loud was overwhelming. Part of him wanted to pull away, to remind himself of his duty as their protector. But another part, a deeper, quieter part, knew they were right. He cared about them too, more than he wanted to admit. He started, then stopped, searching for the right words. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Nira said softly. "Just know that we're here for you no matter what." That night, as they sat together by the fire, Ethan felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The world outside was still dangerous, full of unknown threats. But here, in this tiny cabin with Lyra and Nira, he felt safe. More than that, he felt whole. And for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to hope for the future, for peace, and for the possibility of love in a universe full of chaos. The days that followed were a mix of routine and tension. Ethan spent most of his time shadowing Lyra and Nira, learning their habits and keeping watch for any signs of trouble. The estate remained peaceful on the surface, but Ethan's instincts told him it was only a matter of time before something happened. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, even though he found no evidence of intruders during his patrols. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan joined the twins in the library. It was one of their favorite places, filled with shelves of books and comfortable chairs arranged near a large window that offered a stunning view of the gardens. Lyra was reading a novel about human history, while Nira flipped through a science magazine. Ethan stood by the door, his eyes scanning the room and occasionally glancing outside. "This is nice," Lyra said suddenly, breaking the quiet. "Having you here feels safe." Ethan turned to her, surprised by the comment. "I'm just doing my job," he replied. Though her words made him feel oddly proud, Nira looked up from her magazine, her green eyes glowing softly. "It's more than that. You're not like the others who tried to protect us. You actually care." Ethan didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to people noticing or commenting on his emotions. Most of the time, he kept them hidden, buried beneath layers of professionalism. But there was something about the twins that made it hard to stay guarded. Maybe it was their honesty, or the way they seemed to see right through him. Before he could think of a reply, a loud crash echoed through the house. Ethan's body tensed immediately. He motioned for the twins to stay behind him as he moved toward the sound. It had come from the kitchen, where Daniel was supposed to be cleaning up after dinner. Pushing open the door, Ethan found the room in chaos. Pots and pans were scattered across the floor. and the back door hung open, swinging slightly in the breeze. "Daniel?" Ethan called out, his voice sharp. There was no answer. Stepping carefully over the mess, he checked the corners of the room, his hand hovering near the weapon holstered at his side. The twins appeared in the doorway, their expressions tense. "What's going on?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know yet," Ethan said, keeping his tone calm. "Stay close." He led them back to the library, deciding it would be safer to keep them in one place until he figured out what had happened. As he locked the door, he noticed Lyra clutching Nira's arm tightly. Their usual confidence was gone, replaced by fear. Ethan felt a surge of anger, not just at whoever had caused this, but at himself for not preventing it. Minutes later, Daniel burst into the hallway, panting and wide-eyed. "There were men!" he gasped. "They came out of nowhere. I tried to stop them, but they knocked me down and ran off." Ethan frowned. "Did you recognize them? Did they say anything?" Daniel shook his head. "No, they wore masks. But they were carrying strange weapons, things I've never seen before." Ethan's stomach tightened. This wasn't some random break-in. It was a warning. Whoever wanted to harm the twins was testing their defenses, seeing how far they could get. He turned to the twins, who were now seated on the couch, holding each other for comfort. "We need to increase security," Ethan said firmly. "Starting tonight, I'll stay closer to you. No more separate rooms." Lyra nodded, her face pale. "Do you think they'll come back?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But if they do, we'll be ready." That night, Ethan set up a makeshift bed near the twins' bedroom. He knew it wasn't ideal, but it was necessary. Every creak of the floorboards and rustle of leaves outside made him jump, his senses on high alert. Despite his exhaustion, sleep eluded him. Instead, he replayed the events of the evening in his mind, trying to piece together who might be behind the attack. The next morning brought no answers, only more questions. A thorough search of the estate revealed nothing unusual, no footprints, no fingerprints, no clues. Whoever had broken in knew what they were doing. Ethan spent hours reviewing the property's security system, tightening protocols, and adding extra cameras. He also contacted his contacts in the private security world, asking for information about groups known to target alien visitors. So far, no leads emerged. As the day wore on, Ethan noticed the twins growing quieter. They still smiled and spoke when prompted, but there was a heaviness in their eyes that hadn't been there before. He wanted to reassure them, to tell them everything would be okay, but he didn't want to make promises he couldn't keep. That evening, as they sat together in the study, Lyra finally broke the silence. "We're scared, Ethan," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not just for ourselves, but for our mission. If we fail, so many lives will be lost." Ethan leaned forward, his expression serious. "You're not going to fail. I won't let that happen." Nira reached out and placed a hand on his arm. "You can't promise that. But knowing you're here helps, more than you realize." Her touch sent a shiver down Ethan's spine, though he tried to ignore it. He cleared his throat, standing abruptly. "I need to check the perimeter again. Stay here." Outside, the air was cool and still. Ethan walked slowly, his eyes scanning the shadows. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, even though he saw no one. The estate was vast, with plenty of places for someone to hide. He cursed under his breath, wishing he had more resources, more manpower. When he returned inside, he found the twins waiting for him in the hallway. "We wanted to thank you," Lyra said softly, "for everything." Ethan shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "It's my job." "No," Nira said firmly. "It's more than that. You've become part of our team, part of our family. And we're grateful." Ethan didn't know what to say. He had always prided himself on being professional, on keeping his distance from clients. But these two women were different. They had a way of breaking through his defenses, of making him feel things he hadn't felt in years. As the night deepened, Ethan settled into his spot near their bedroom, listening to the soft hum of their voices as they talked quietly inside. He couldn't understand everything they said, but their tone was soothing, almost musical. For the first time since the attack, he allowed himself to relax, if only for a moment, but the peace was short-lived. Just after midnight, the alarms blared, jolting Ethan awake. He grabbed his weapon and rushed to the twins' room, finding them already awake and dressed. "What's happening?" Lyra asked, her voice tight with fear. "Stay behind me," Ethan ordered, leading them into the hallway. Smoke began filling the corridors, making it hard to see. The smell of burning plastic stung his nose. Someone had set fire to the east wing of the house. Ethan guided the twins toward the main exit, but as they reached the stairs, 3 figures emerged from the smoke, armed with strange devices that crackled with energy. Ethan raised his weapon, firing a warning shot. The intruders hesitated, giving him just enough time to push the twins behind a nearby column. "Lyra, Nira, stay down," he shouted, stepping forward to face the attackers. He fired again, this time aiming for one of the masked figures. The man went down, clutching his leg, but the other 2 retaliated, sending bolts of energy flying in Ethan's direction. The twins weren't idle. With a sudden burst of light, Lyra created a shimmering barrier between them and the attackers, deflecting the energy blast. Nira extended her hands, releasing a pulse of her own energy that sent one of the remaining intruders stumbling backward. Ethan seized the opportunity, closing the distance and disarming the last attacker with a swift kick. Within moments, the threat was neutralized. The twins lowered their barrier, breathing heavily but unharmed. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, turning to them. Lyra nodded, though tears streamed down her face. "We're fine. Thanks to you." Ethan shook his head. "Thanks to all of us. We did this together." As the smoke cleared and the authorities arrived to investigate, Ethan realized something important. This wasn't just about protecting the twins anymore. It was about fighting alongside them, standing shoulder to shoulder, against whatever came their way. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged somewhere. The next morning, Ethan woke up early, his mind already racing with thoughts about the day ahead. He dressed quickly and headed downstairs to the kitchen, where he found Daniel preparing breakfast. The young assistant looked relieved to see him. "Good morning," Daniel said, forcing a smile. "I hope you slept well." Ethan nodded, though he hadn't slept particularly well. His dreams had been filled with images of glowing green eyes and shimmering silver skin. He shook off the thought and poured himself a cup of coffee. "What's the plan for today?" he asked. Daniel hesitated, glancing toward the hallway as if expecting someone to appear. The twins usually take their meals in the dining room. After that, they like to spend time in the library or the gardens. "I'll make sure you're included in their schedule so you can stay close." Ethan appreciated the effort, but knew he couldn't rely solely on Daniel to keep track of the twins. He needed to establish his own routine, one that would allow him to anticipate potential threats. "Got it," he said simply. "Let me know when they're ready for breakfast." A short while later, Ethan was introduced to Lyra and Nira again. They greeted him warmly, inviting him to join them at the table. It was an odd experience, sitting down to eat with 2 alien beings who looked so different yet acted so human. The twins were polite, asking Ethan about his background and sharing bits of their own lives in return. They spoke about their home planet, describing its vast oceans and towering crystal forests. Ethan listened intently, fascinated by their stories. After breakfast, Lyra suggested they take a walk in the gardens. "It's important for us to stay active," she explained. "Our bodies require movement, even if we don't need as much rest as humans do." Ethan agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to assess the estate's layout while keeping an eye on the twins. The gardens were beautiful, with winding paths, vibrant flowers, and small ponds scattered throughout. As they strolled, Nira pointed out different plants, explaining which ones were native to Earth and which reminded her of species from their home world. Ethan noticed how relaxed they seemed, their earlier concerns about danger temporarily forgotten, but Ethan couldn't afford to let his guard down. He scanned the area constantly, looking for anything unusual. So far, everything appeared calm, but he knew better than to trust appearances. Danger often came without warning, and he needed to be prepared. As the day went on, Ethan began to notice subtle differences between the twins. Lyra was more outspoken, quick to share her thoughts and opinions. She had a sharp wit and a playful sense of humor that made her easy to talk to. Nira, on the other hand, was quieter, more introspective. She observed everything around her with careful attention, offering thoughtful comments when prompted. Despite their differences, the bond between them was undeniable. They finished each other's sentences, exchanged knowing glances, and moved in perfect harmony. That evening, after dinner, Ethan found himself alone with the twins in the study. They had requested his presence, saying they wanted to discuss their mission further. Ethan wasn't sure what to expect, but he sat down across from them, ready to listen. Lyra leaned forward, her expression serious. "We need to be honest with you, Ethan. The threats against us are escalating. Our enemies are growing bolder, and we fear it's only a matter of time before they strike here." Nira nodded, adding, "We've tried to handle this quietly, but now it seems we have no choice but to involve others. That's why we're grateful to have you here." Ethan felt a weight settle over him. He had suspected the situation was serious, but hearing the twins confirm it made it all the more real. "Do you have any idea who's behind these threats?" he asked. Lyra sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "There are factions on our planet who oppose peace. They believe war is necessary, that it will bring strength and unity. We represent everything they hate, and they'll stop at nothing to silence us," Nira finished, her voice tinged with sadness. Ethan processed this information silently. Protecting the twins just became more complicated and more dangerous. But he didn't show his concern. Instead, he nodded firmly. "Understood. I'll do everything I can to keep you safe." The twins exchanged a glance, then smiled faintly. "Thank you, Ethan," Lyra said softly. "Your presence gives us hope." As the night wore on, Ethan found himself lingering in the study longer than he intended. The twins were fascinating company, eager to learn about Earth and its people. They asked questions about human culture, politics, and even emotions. Ethan did his best to answer, surprised by how curious they were. In turn, they shared more about their own world, painting a picture of a society vastly different from his own. At one point, Nira reached out and touched Ethan's arm lightly. "You must miss your own kind," she said gently. "Being here with us, surrounded by so much strangeness." Ethan hesitated, caught off guard by the gesture. "I'm used to strange situations," he replied honestly. "But yeah, sometimes I wonder what it'd be like to live a normal life." Lyra tilted her head, studying him. "What does normal mean to you?" Ethan chuckled, unsure how to respond. "I guess not having to worry about threats or danger all the time. Just being able to relax and enjoy the moment." The twins exchanged another glance, this one filled with understanding. "We wish for that too," Lyra admitted, "but our lives haven't allowed it for a long time." The conversation shifted after that, becoming lighter and more casual. Ethan found himself laughing at Lyra's jokes and nodding along with Nira's observations. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of connection, as though he'd finally met people who truly understood him. When the clock struck midnight, Ethan realized he'd been talking with the twins for hours. He stood reluctantly, knowing he needed to get some rest. "I should go," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be busy." Lyra and Nira rose with him, walking him to the door. "Thank you for staying with us tonight," Nira said. "It meant a lot." Ethan nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. "Anytime. Good night." As he walked back to his room, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. He wasn't just a bodyguard anymore. He was part of their circle, someone they trusted. And though the dangers ahead were daunting, he felt a renewed determination to protect them, not just because it was his job, but because they deserved the chance to succeed. Lying in bed that night, Ethan replayed the day's events in his mind. The twins were unlike anyone he'd ever met, blending grace and strength in a way that left him in awe. He didn't fully understand their world or their mission, but he was beginning to care deeply about both. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he wouldn't face them alone. Ethan Carter had always been a man of action. He wasn't the kind to sit around and wait for things to happen. He preferred to take charge, to move forward no matter what stood in his way. That was why, when the call came late one evening, he didn't hesitate long before picking up. The voice on the other end was calm but urgent, explaining that Ethan's skills were needed for a unique assignment. At first, Ethan thought it was just another high-profile job some rich client needing extra security or maybe a celebrity, looking for a bodyguard. But as the caller continued, Ethan realized this was something entirely different. The client explained that Ethan would be protecting two individuals who were not from Earth. They were twin sisters, members of an alien species called the Velari. Ethan listened carefully, his brow furrowing as the details unfolded. The Velari were known across the galaxy as peaceful explorers, beings who valued diplomacy and understanding above all else. These particular twins, Lyra and Nira, were here on Earth as diplomats. Their mission was critical. They were trying to broker peace between warring factions back on their home planet. But there was trouble brewing. Someone or some group didn't want them to succeed. There had already been threats made against their lives, and now they needed someone capable of keeping them safe. Ethan wasn't sure how to feel about all of this. Aliens, diplomats, interstellar politics. It sounded like something out of a movie, not real life. But then again, Ethan had seen enough strange things during his time in the military to know that the universe was full of surprises. Besides, the caller wasn't asking him to make decisions about galactic wars. His job was simple: keep these two women alive. And if doing so could help prevent a war light years away, well, that was just an added bonus. Thought the next morning, Ethan packed his gear and drove to the address he'd been given. It was a sprawling estate nestled deep in the countryside, surrounded by dense woods and tall iron gates. As he approached, he noticed the place was too quiet. There were no signs of activity, no guards patrolling the perimeter. For a moment, he wondered if he'd come to the wrong location. But then the gate swung open automatically, and he proceeded down the long driveway until he reached the main house. A young man greeted him at the door. He introduced himself as Daniel, one of the assistants assigned to help with the twins' stay on Earth. Daniel seemed nervous, fidgeting with his hands as he led Ethan inside. "They're waiting for you in the study," he said quietly. Ethan nodded and followed him through the grand halls of the mansion. The interior was lavish, filled with expensive furniture and artwork, but Ethan barely paid attention. His focus was on the task ahead. When they entered the study, Ethan saw them. For the first time, Lyra and Nira stood side by side near the fireplace, their presence immediately commanding the room. They looked almost identical, though there were subtle differences in their features. Both had shimmering silver skin that caught the light in a way that made them seem almost ethereal. Their eyes glowed faintly green, giving them an otherworldly appearance. Yet despite their alien nature, there was something undeniably human about them, the way they carried themselves, the warmth in their expressions. "Ethan Carter," Lyra said, her voice smooth and melodic. She stepped forward, extending a hand. Ethan shook it, surprised by how normal it felt. Her grip was firm, confident. "We've heard good things about you." Nira smiled softly, her gaze steady. "Thank you for agreeing to protect us. We understand this is unusual." Ethan shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Unusual doesn't bother me. My job is to keep you safe, and that's what I'll do." Over the next hour, the twins explained more about their situation. They spoke openly about their mission, their hopes for peace, and the dangers they faced. Ethan listened intently, asking questions when necessary. He learned that the Velari were a highly advanced species, capable of incredible feats thanks to their mastery of energy manipulation. Yet for all their power, they were pacifists at heart. Violence was abhorrent to them, which made their current predicament even more challenging. As the conversation drew to a close, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to these women than met the eye. They were intelligent, composed, and clearly determined to see their mission through. But there was also a vulnerability about them, a sense that they carried burdens heavier than most people could imagine. Ethan found himself wanting to know more not just about their mission, but about them as individuals. Later that evening, after Daniel showed him to his quarters, Ethan sat alone in his room thinking. This assignment was unlike anything he'd ever done before. Protecting two alien diplomats from unknown threats was going to be tricky, especially since he still didn't have all the details. But there was something else nagging at him, something he couldn't quite put into words. Maybe it was the way Lyra had looked at him during their meeting, her glowing eyes studying him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. Or maybe it was the softness in Nira's voice when she thanked him, as though she genuinely appreciated his presence. Whatever it was, Ethan knew one thing for certain. This job was going to test him in ways he hadn't anticipated. And as he lay down to sleep that night, he couldn't help but wonder what the days ahead would bring.